Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the April 16th regular meeting of Council. The first item on the agenda tonight is the adoption of the minutes of the special Council meeting held March 26th, 2018. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favour? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. The next item is the adoption of the minutes of the Council meeting held April 4th, 2018. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beil. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favour? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. And finally, I have the minutes of the public hearing, April 4th, 2018. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Beil, seconded by, Councillor Powell. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favour? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. And lastly, I need an approval of the agenda that the April 16, 2018 Council meeting agenda be approved. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Burton, Councillor Beil. All those in favour? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. First item tonight under new business. I'm going to go around the table. I'm going to start on my left again. Councillor Patterson. Anything under new business?
Thank you, Your Worship. Bellina students will be coming forward and doing a little presentation in regards to their Nicaragua trip and giving us some feedback. And one of the other projects that they're going to be pursuing in the following school year. I have a Oceanside Development meeting tomorrow, so I'll touch base with you in the following. And I just wanted to mention, and I'm sure, and it is in our agenda, the proclamation of Volunteer Week. But the SOS does a volunteer luncheon on that tomorrow. It has 160 people in attendance, and that's just a small amount of the volunteers in our community. And that I just wanted to personally thank you, because this community doesn't work without the volunteers in it. And that's everything for me.
Councillor Oates?
No new business. Just want to say that I attended the AVICC on the weekend. It was a good opportunity to talk to the elected people from around the island there. It was a chance to share in what we have, what works good and what doesn't work good. It was a good opportunity to educate myself on some of the timely issues that are happening, and so I took the opportunity to talk to a lot of people. And I know that you may talk about it later, but the problems we're facing here in Parksville are no different than what people are facing everywhere else on the island. In fact, we're probably fortunate by some standards.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I have not been here for 3 weeks. I took a well-deserved road trip with my son, but I did attend a meeting on Sunday. I attended a luncheon honoring the veterans at the Legion in Parksville. I have to say it was a full house, and it really brings home what people, vets, give up when they go to war, and it was very moving.
Thank you, and that's very, very true. Councillor Beil.
Thank you. I also attended the AVICC in Victoria, and it was a very full 3 days, 2.5 days, going through resolutions, debating, meeting with other elected officials. There were some really good updates on cannabis regulation that will be coming forth. Not completely filled in all the blanks, but some good information, as well as on other government initiatives. And I also am very aware of the fact that Earth Day is coming up. It is this coming Sunday, April 22nd, and I would like to make a motion. I would like to direct staff to investigate the options to enact a ban on the use of single-use plastic bags at point of sale within the City of Parksville, and report back to Council with appropriate legislative tools and an implementation strategy to support this initiative.
Discussion?
Okay. May I
Do you
speak?
want to give us some more
Okay.
information, please?
Yeah, as I said, it is Earth Day, and so it seems appropriate to make this motion at this time. It would apply to plastic bags at point of sale, i.e. at the checkout stand, and it would contribute to a reduction in single-use items. Earlier this year, we received the results of a survey on the topic, and the survey results indicated 80% support for the reduction of plastic bags. Close to 60% support a ban at the checkout stand, with similar results for both residents and business owners. Another Oceanside community found very similar results, with close to 70% support for a ban. And the opposing of a ban aims to change consumer behaviors, encouraging the adoption of more sustainable habits and a switch to reusable, long-life bag alternatives. And there's certainly lots of information about this, and particularly concerns about the health of our ocean and other aspects of this. I could go on, but I'll leave that at that right now in case there's other discussion, other points that people would like to make.
Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Councillor Beil?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Burton?
Thank you. On April the 11th, I attended the Accessibility Oceanside Association Annual General Meeting. They've elected a new board, including some new members, which was good to see. And their membership is growing, and they seem to have developed a strong focus on reaching out to all of the members of the community that have accessibility issues. And then I also attended the AVICC conference in Victoria this weekend. And of particular interest, I think, in terms of the presentations was the coastal presentation on rising oceans, looking at green stormwater management, shoreline management, and also I attended the meeting of the Island Corridor Foundation with regard to the rail. I was very interested that their language seems to have changed significantly to include trails as well as rail. So that was good to see, and good to meet with our counterparts in other communities and discuss common issues. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think in the local paper last week in Victoria, they were talking about for that corridor from Langford into town, they were going to use buses. They're not going to use the trains. Okay, I have a few items, members of council. The city woods chipping program is underway until April 24th. So those of you who want to get their wood chipping stuff out on the front of the driveways should do so. Also, the annual Emergency Preparedness Expo will be hosted by the City of Parksville, Town of Qualicum Beach on the RDN on Saturday, April the 28th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Qualicum Beach Civic Center. And I believe Mr. Dawson's going to talk a little more about that tonight, so I'll leave that to him. I attended the AVICC conference, and on Friday morning I went to the cannabis session at 9 o'clock, and that's coming along, and rules and regulations are slowly coming out in terms of minimum age and where cannabis can be sold, where it can't be sold, and what you can grow and what you can't grow. But I also attended after that the Mayor's Caucus, and sort of an anecdotal tale. There were about 40 mayors sitting around the table. All of the mayors weren't there, but a good percentage of them were. And one of the mayors began to describe how terrible the passage of legalizing marijuana was going to be for his particular small city. And he gave all the reasons why, because they're selling them illegally now, and the bylaw people are busy, and the police have been busy. And that was one extreme. And then one other mayor piped up and said, we have no problems in our community. Everybody smokes, and they do it at home and alone. There's no issues. So somewhere in between is where all this thing is going to fall. But it was quite an interesting conversation around the table. There was also, I think that the audience will find this interesting as well as council. We also had a discussion about what was happening with the Vancouver Regional Board with regards to pensions and salary raises. And I finally made the suggestion, I'd been around a while, maybe too long for some people, but I've gone through this salary increase or stipend increase for mayors and councillors, and I suggested that that's something that we take to UBCM and get them to look at how it can be done, because some people are saying we're not paid enough. Other people are saying, well, maybe we need more benefits, and it goes on and on and on. And this discussion was prompted by the fact that the federal government has taken away the 30% tax reduction every year as part of the program, and that's no longer applicable starting in 2019. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was a little bit about this whole issue that we're looking at and talking about, and that has to do with crime and homelessness and poverty and all of that sort of thing. And I want to assure you that it's everywhere. It's not only in Parksville. It exists throughout the island. It starts in Victoria, and it goes all the way up to Port Alice and Port Hardy. And I can tell you that some places are really in tough shape. Some smaller cities and smaller towns have terrible issues that are going on, and they're trying to cope with them. And unfortunately, it's a phenomenon of our time. So I'll leave it at that. I also attended the shorelines, the Green Shores, with Councillor Burden, and I have a card. There was a lawyer, because we used the Green Shores principle when we first did the erosion of the bank over here in the community park. And when it came to do it a second time, I think the Director of Engineering will agree with me that we got into a bit of a kerfuffle with one of the ministries, and I talked about that. And this particular Green Shores organization, I've given her card to the acting CEO to give to you, who can, in future when we're doing this, they've told me that they've identified to the different ministries that are involved, Fisheries and Oceans and Lands and Forest, more information about the Green Shores project, which is the healthiest way to go, and it's been proven to be successful in a lot of other areas. So on that note, anything else anybody wants to know about, you can find on the city's website and Facebook page, or call me. The next presentation is on my behalf. I wish to remind everyone that this coming week, the week of the 15th to the 21st, has been proclaimed Volunteer Appreciation Week in the City of Parksville. And you know, that says it all. This is an opportunity to recognize volunteers who contribute so much to our community. And on behalf of Council, I want to express our thanks to countless individuals who volunteer their time in so many ways. And why we don't see it every day, it's below the radar, I can assure you. And the contributions of volunteers don't go unnoticed and are truly appreciated. And I can tell you that from my time in Parksville and my time on Council and as Mayor, I personally have gone to these organizations, and they do great work, and they do it. They're unheralded. They don't talk about it. They don't brag about it. They just go ahead and do it. So it's pretty wonderful. And on that note, there's, as Councillor Patterson pointed out, there's an SOS Volunteer Appreciation Dinner tomorrow starting at 11:30, I believe. And tomorrow evening, I'll be going to one at the Conference Center for the Regional District of Nanaimo. And I hope that Councillor Beil and Councillor Oates can be there tomorrow night. We're going to be celebrating the volunteers in the area of Oceanside. Okay, on that note, moving on the agenda, under correspondence, we have a letter. This is to Regional District of Nanaimo Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Service Amendment Bylaw number 1556.03, 2018. This bylaw proposes to alter the apportionment allocation of the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Service. As part of the approval process, the RDN requires consent of at least 2/3 of the local service participants. So I need a mover and a seconder for this. Do I have them? Councillor Burton and Councillor Oates. Are there any questions, any comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Very important. The next bit of correspondence is for receiving. It's from the Victoria Electric Vehicle Association and the Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure. I'm sure you've all read the correspondence, so I need a mover and a seconder to receive the correspondence. Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Powell. All those in favor to receive? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. So the first report we have this evening, we're going to ask Mr. Aaron Dawson, our Emergency Measures Organization representative, to give us a presentation on the emergency program update. And this will be followed up. Aaron, I hope you're going to talk about what's coming up next Saturday and what's available at the same time? Not this Saturday. The following Saturday, I'm sorry, on 28th.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship, and to Council. Thanks for making a few minutes for us. Just to bring you a brief update on what we've done, some of the highlights of what's happened in the last few months and some of the upcoming things. So there's what we're going to talk about tonight, and I just wanted to remind you again who we are. You've got myself representing the City of Parksville, Rob Damon representing the town of Qualicum Beach. You've met Rob before. He's away right now. Behind me, I would like to introduce John Wilson. He's the manager of emergency services for the regional district. He's a main player in EMO with us. And Chris is right beside him. You've met Chris before. He's our volunteer coordinator. And Melissa Tomlinson is the last player of the group with us, and she's off tonight doing a presentation to another group of people. So that's part of the beauty of sharing and combining our roles. So somebody can have some time away, other people can work on other things, and some people can be away doing presentations, so we can almost multitask as much as we can as guys. So to start off, you will recall back on January 23rd, we had an earthquake in Alaska and a subsequent tsunami warning. So us as emergency program coordinators, we were up all night dealing with that. So John and Rob and I were calling back and forth, making sure that everything was appropriately looked after and that we understood all of the messaging that was coming out. Murphy's Law being what it is, we needed to stay up even though there wasn't a direct alarm for the east coast of the island, because Murphy says the moment we'd gone to bed they'd have upgraded that to us needing to be up. However, while we were up and we shared information amongst ourselves and amongst our fire chiefs and reviewed all the information that was in the media, unfortunately I did have to wake up Deb Tardif and ask her to put some social media out to clear up some of those things for us to make it just abundantly clear. We only woke up the people that we needed to because there was no direct threat to the east coast here. If there had been, yeah, you'd all woke up with us. So thankfully there wasn't. We were able to share with our friends on the West Coast. We reached out to them, let them know we were available, let them know that all the important people to help them were awake. And that turned over to having everything called down at, as you see, 4:16 a.m. And we all came to work to answer questions from the public all day. And the reason we came to work was because we knew we were going to get questions. Historically, as soon as an event happens, we get lots of questions, so we had to take advantage of that opportunity. Less than a week later, when we thought things might calm down, we had an unseasonable rain event, which turned into a pretty substantial flood event throughout lots of the parts of the region. Now, it didn't really affect us in a great way at the City of Parksville or the town of Qualicum Beach. But out in the rural areas, they were very busy. And where we were able to help in the stream of what EMO does is Rob and I were able to back up John. When John was trying to get some rest, we would stand up and try and provide whatever information we could, whatever kind of support and advice to the regional district staff in order for them to continue answering questions. Where EMO really shone through was with Chris again, Chris and the volunteers who dealt with all the people that were evacuated from Perry's RV park. So everybody was moved out of Perry's. John brought up some buses. That worked as a great sort of stopgap to get people registered, and then transferred over to the Bayside, where they stayed for, how long were they there? Short of a week. Okay. So for short of a week. And what we did was we had daily meetings with those residents to update them on what was going on. We were able to bring in all the right people, like the health inspector, the electrical inspector, and anybody else from a government agency that had a role to play in it, so that the residents were always up to date and up to knowledge on what was going on, so they could get back into their homes and start off life again as soon as possible. So when I say in the last bullet there that the networking that we do is breaking down the silos, the perfect example of that was one of the last mornings we needed an electrical inspector to come and talk to the people, because we have been reaching out and talking to all the different groups, all the different provincial, federal, whatever ministries are out there. We knew who to call. And because we have those relationships, we were able to get somebody within a couple of hours. And that person was pivotal to answering a lot of questions for the residents. Let's see, what else do I want to say? Oh, excuse me, the one thing that I do want to say, and I've got the Quality Resort Bayside name up there, they went out of their way to help those residents. They only get so much money from the province for the 72 hours or more that they are evacuated. What the Bayside did was take a look at their menu and decided that the amount of money they had didn't match their menu. They wouldn't have enough money to have the 3 meals a day. So the Bayside put together specific menus that would match the money that they were allotted, so that they made sure everybody got fed properly. So I wanted to point that out to Council. That was really big on the part of the Bayside. So, as your worship pointed out earlier, so thankfully we got over that stuff, and now we're moving forward. So as your worship pointed out earlier, we have the expo coming up on April 28th. This is our 4th expo. We started with about 12 exhibitors. We now have, we're as high as 43 at one point. We're down to 41. 2 have had to pull out for whatever reason. But we have 41 exhibitors coming this year. So everything anybody is going to want to know about getting prepared, experiencing what an earthquake is like at the shake zone, ask questions, gain knowledge, this will be the place to do it on the 28th of April. I would hope that everyone that's in this room will come. And we've been reaching out, doing all of our marketing to get as many people as possible. And again, Deb Tardif has been a wizard for us in the marketing area. What I'm kind of hoping you'll do is you'll come and support the Shriners and have a pancake breakfast or a barbecue lunch and then jump on the shake zone. See how that works out? The week after we have the expo, we have the second sweeper exercise. A year ago in May, we had an exercise where we try to make radio connectivity, emergency communications from all corners of Vancouver Island, Powell River, Sunshine Coast, Vancouver now, and down through Northwest Washington State, to figure out paths that don't necessarily exist normally or wouldn't be standard methods to pass messages to get them to the province or wherever we need to get those messages to get help for whether it's our local government or any other local government. So we have found that although there are generalized processes, we have asked the questions of what happens if those processes don't work, and there's no answer. So we've gone out ourselves as communities across Vancouver Island to try and develop this so that we know when something bad happens, when we lose standard forms of communication, we will have predetermined extra paths to reach out to where we need to go. So that's happening on May the 3rd, and you will see that the Canadian Air Force are excited to be with us again this year. They find it as a great training exercise, and they see the value in having planes in the air during a major disaster to pick up information wherever they can and pass it to whatever part of the province needs to receive it. Emergency Preparedness Week, the first full week of May every year, all across Canada. We do our expo outside of that. We tried to do our expo within Emergency Preparedness Week the first couple of years, and we found that half of the exhibitors that are coming to us won't come to us during that week because they're busy in Vancouver or Victoria. So we get to kind of double dip here. We get everybody coming to us for the expo, and we get everybody hopefully ramped up about emergency preparedness. And then during Emergency Preparedness Week, as you see on the screen, we reach out, we go set up in all the different corners of the region, and we offer one-on-one conversation with an Emergency Preparedness Coordinator. You can get all your questions answered there as well. Little Qualicum River Estates exercise that ESS exercise that we're going to have in June is a continuation of a program that we started last year, where we reached out to neighborhoods that want to learn more, become more organized and more prepared. With these neighborhoods offered us an opportunity to train our ESS people better. And we have an ESS trailer full of supplies that allows us to have a mobile reception center. So with that mobile reception center, we've continued to develop that to the point now where it's completely organized and filled in the back in a way that our volunteers have told us will work for them to set up quickly to be able to respond to whatever the case is, whether it's an evacuated neighborhood or just the lack of buildings to use. So what we're going to do now that we've gone through this process and kitted the trailer out properly, or to what we think is proper, Little Qualicum River Estates has reached out and said, we would like an exercise. So great. In June, we are going to meet with or have an exercise with them. They're going to evacuate. Chris, do you remember how much of the neighborhood they're going to evacuate? So what's that, 300 people? So they're going to attempt to evacuate 300 people, and we're going to try and deal with that, because that's a potential reality for us. So it works both ways. We can help them get prepared, and they can help us get prepared. So this kind of a scenario is great all the way around. That's it. Do you have any questions for me?
Members of council, any questions for Mr. Dawson? I have one, if I can start off. I saw a report in the newspapers not too long ago that basically says most of us, and I checked my pantry, and that includes me, most of us aren't prepared for the required 3 days of water and food and that sort of thing. So we're going to focus a bit on that on Saturday the 28th.
We always try to start with that. Personal preparedness is the root of everything. If people aren't prepared, we aren't going to go anywhere. And to your point about 3 days, we try to prepare. We tell people to prepare for a week as a minimum.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks, Aaron, for coming. I always enjoy your presentations, and I attended the AGM for the Parksville Chamber of Commerce last week, where you had a showcase table. So I know that businesses in the community were very much chatting and talking a little bit after, when you made a statement that 70% of businesses, if they're down for a week in this community, are not likely to return to business.
Correct.
And that shocked a lot of people.
That's scary, and that's why we came to the chamber to say that, is we want to help. We want to help businesses. We want to see businesses back on their feet and open as quickly as possible.
And from my point of view, I've always known that being on the island, we have very limited amount of food quantity here. So it's just the way of being on an island, and that we have to be a little bit more prepared, because if something catastrophic did happen to us, then we're looking at other areas of the province and perhaps the states and that to help us out.
Yeah, correct, and thank you for that. We do have a 3-day supply of food at any time on the island. So if that stops happening, if we stop getting deliveries, that 3-day supply starts ticking down.
So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Rose?
Yes, thank you very much. Some time ago in our council packages, we received this emergency preparedness workbook. I was hoping that you were going to speak about that tonight, because I brought that at home, and my wife and I were both really impressed with the detail and the amount of information that was in that book, to the point where we keep it on our coffee table. And and refer to it. So whoever was involved in the creation of that book, kudos, because it's a very good resource material, and it certainly lays the groundwork for people to become personally prepared. I was prepared, and I had this book to bring tonight, but it's sitting on the coffee table. But I just wanted to pass along to you and whoever else was involved with that, gratitude for a really useful tool.
I appreciate that, and I will pass that along. That's something that we created through the Mid-Island Emergency Coordinators and Managers Group. So that's the same book now that's distributed from basically the top of the Malahat to Port Hardy. So any resident will get exactly the same information now.
And finally, from me, from somebody who lived back east for a long time, when I look at the weather, in terms of what the weather is going to do to communities all across the country, because of wind and because of ice storms and that sort of thing, we'd better be prepared. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to
Thank you all
it.
for your support. It's appreciated.
Next, we have the consideration of a development permit for a restaurant at 1182 Island Highway East. Mr. Russell, I need a mover and a seconder for I can take all the four recommendations, Mrs. Keller. I need a mover and a seconder for the four recommendations. Moved by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Beil. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding the development permit for a restaurant on 1182 Island Highway East?
Sure, for Mayor Worship. So for council consideration this evening is a development permit for a 140-seat restaurant, Ricky's Restaurant, proposed on the same property as the Arbutus Motel. As part of the application, it'll approve basically the architectural form and style of the building, landscaping particulars, parking layout, as well as there's some signage that's part of the proposal. And they've incorporated a request to allow for a temporary sign until such time as the premise is physically built. And the recommendations are per the agenda.
Are there any questions for Mr. Russell on this particular? Councillor Patterson.
Not so much a question, Your Worship, but this project and that came before the advisory design panel. So they did do a couple requests that the proponent looked at and did some revising, and that one of what I want to see that. Number 3 with the temporary freestanding sign, and that I think that a lot of you will recognize from other communities that are a little larger, and that there's a lot of electronic reader board type signs and everything. There's one in Parksville over by the mini golf and that. So that was something that they had requested, but it wasn't part of the zoning because it is in the resort and in the Craig Bay zoning and that. So again, lots of discussion, a lot of great feedback, a lot of information from, again, volunteers that give their time and their expertise so that we can see a development permit that has been vetted already.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Russell? Councillor Beil.
Thank you. And just a follow-up to Councillor Patterson, I had heard out in the community some concerns about the original proposal for the sign and did wonder about that. So I'm very pleased to see that that has been adjusted, in the final proposal. And I just would like to thank and acknowledge the great work done by Mr. Russell. He's always accommodating when I come to him with questions to get clarification about these proposals. So thank you again for your time and the clarity you provide.
Councillor Oates.
Thank you. I'm just, so this temporary sign is to be put up there until, what is the purpose of the temporary sign? To advertise the business is open or that the business is going to be open? What is the purpose of the temporary sign?
Mr. Russell.
If a mayor worship through to Councillor Oates, until the business is actually operating, the sign would be a third-party sign, and the bylaw doesn't allow for signage that isn't directly associated with a business. So the variance request allows for the sign to exist to basically like a coming soon sign to allow them to get the word out that they're coming to that property.
So that could sit there for, what's the maximum amount of time a coming soon sign could sit there?
If I may, Your Worship, I've specified it in the development permit itself, so that it does. It's also, I should mention, located in the same location where their permanent sign is to go. So to put their permanent sign in, it will have to be removed. But as a backup contingency, the development permit itself proposes 18 months maximum.
So there is a sunset on it. It's 18 months maximum. Okay, thank you very much. That's all my questions.
Anyone else? Seeing no more further questions, I'm going to call the vote. I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. The next report, again, Council, is a report for the consideration of a development permit to facilitate an independent living seniors housing facility at 180 Jensen Avenue East. I have three recommendations. Mrs. Keeler, I can take them all together. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Powell. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on this issue?
Sure, if I may, Your Worship. So for Council consideration this evening is a development permit for a 6-story, 188-unit congregate care seniors facility with dining facility for restaurants, a theater inside, as well as child care, parking, landscaping, etc. on the northern half of the property at 180 Jensen Avenue East. The considerations are again related to the style and architecture and its aesthetic qualities. That's really what's for consideration based on the OCP guidelines. And then the recommendations are as per the agenda.
Any questions for Mr. Russell? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the Director of Planning. And so I did call you about the daycare, and that's going to be open to the public.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell, my understanding in discussions with the property owner originally is that was not the case. We did discuss that there is a public interest in daycare, so they have taken that under consideration, and the last time we spoke, that was their indication. Obviously, it's how they operate their facility is at their discretion, but that's what they've indicated last time we spoke.
Councillor Burton.
Yeah, this is a private enterprise and they're not selling provincial beds, so we will be receiving the taxes that go along with this development.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Burton, I'm not aware of any provincial involvement in this project.
I don't see it anywhere in the report. Councillor Burton.
I didn't see it anywhere in the report either, and I guess, do they have to come to us prior to? I look around at some of the care homes that we have in our community, and obviously with the age that we have in our community, we require those places, but they don't pay land taxes, so they have to be absorbed by the rest of the community. And this is a massive development on a prime piece of property. Do we have any way of making sure that we receive tax revenue from this property going forward?
Councillor Powell. I'll talk to that in a moment.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think if it's zoned institutional, then it's permissive tax, but otherwise it's private. And so it's my understanding that they would pay the full tax on that. Is that not correct?
Mr. Russell?
If I may, Your Worship, I'm going to defer to the Director of Finance on that question.
I'm not really prepared for this question, but I would say if it's private, it's going to be taxed. If it's government-owned, that could be a different story. It doesn't sound like that's the case here. A couple of the other ones in town are actually societies that council awards they're nonprofit societies that council awards a permissive tax exemption to. If that's not the situation with this one, and it is privately owned for-profit enterprise, then it will be taxed.
In my exploration of the background of this company, they're a very good company. They've got a very good reputation, and it's certainly a privately owned. It's a private enterprise. I've never seen anywhere where they're doing work with or for the government.
I guess my questioning is more around the lines of what happens in the future if there's a change. Is there any kind of a provision within our zoning, within our permitting process that allows us to have input if there's a change in the future?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Burton, we're only really allowed under zoning to regulate land uses, not the users of land. And so a different ownership arrangement or who the owner is, we're not in a position to regulate that. And so if there was a change, if the province purchased the property, for example, then if they qualify for an exemption, they would qualify for an exemption. We wouldn't be in a position to regulate that.
Okay. Everybody ready to call the vote? All those in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, the next report is the Corfield Street upgrades and Jensen Avenue Trail Construction Administration Engineering Services. And Mr. Figuera, I need a mover and a seconder before I go to Mr. Figuera. Moved by Councillor Beil, seconded by Councillor Powell. Mr. Figuera, background on the issue, please.
If I may, Your Worship, before Council is a report to award the construction administration services for Corfield Street upgrades and Jensen Avenue Trail to Coors and Associates Engineering in the amount of $225,000 plus tax. In November of 2017, Council awarded the construction contract for the subject project to Low Car Industries. As Council knows, the project is currently underway. Council was also made aware at that time that the surplus monies would be used to finance the professional services during construction and production of as-built drawings. As per City Policy 6.14, as the service contract exceeds $100,000, staff are required to obtain Council approval prior to awarding the work, and the recommendations are as per the report.
Any questions for Mr. Butterworth? I'm sorry, Mr. Figuera. I'm Mr. Butterworth, you're next. Get ready. Okay. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Towards our Mr. Figuera, can you tell me how long the time period for this project is slated? Is it in the same time frame as the Corfield upgrade?
If I may, Your Worship, yeah, the time frame coincides with the current construction that's going on right now.
Any further questions for Mr. Figuera? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, Emergency Program Volunteer Coordinator. Before I go to Mrs. Kaler, I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Beil, seconded by Councillor Powell. Mrs. Kaler, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding the Emergency Program Volunteer Coordinator?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the councillors may be aware that we have an existing agreement with the three parties in Oceanside, so the Regional District of Nanaimo, Town of Qualicum, and City of Parksville. The city administers the contract for the Emergency Social Services Coordinator, who was here present earlier tonight. We only received one applicant, who was thankfully Chris James. He has proven to be an exemplary person in this role for us for the last several years. This was in some ways a bit of a technicality in that the purchasing policy required us to do a slightly different process to renew the agreement. And recommendations are per the agenda. If anyone has any questions specifically, we can certainly discuss after.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Kaler? Fairly straightforward. Councillor Oates.
Not that I'm opposed to doing it here, but it seems to me this is almost like something that should have been done in a closed meeting of council. I mean, we're talking about identifiable individuals, and we're talking about awarding a contract, and it seems similar to things that we've done in an in-camera meeting before. So just for my education purposes, how is it that we're doing something like this in an open meeting of council?
Would you please educate Councillor Oates? Thank you.
I'll try to answer the question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Oates. This was a public process for the through the RFP process, and because we only received one applicant, we felt that it was okay to bring that forward, and it is the current applicant. If we receive several applicants and we're asking council to evaluate, we typically do that in camera for a number of reasons, to protect the privacy of the individuals, but also to protect some of the proprietary information that those folks would be presenting in response to the RFP. The term and scope of the contract have not changed since the original contract. This was simply because our purchasing policy requires over a certain amount that be approved by the CAO and can't be done at the staff level. And we typically get approval from council before we enter into new agreements of this type, where myself and the mayor sign on behalf of council.
Okay, Councillor Oates. Okay. Any further questions? I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Finally, Mr. Butterworth, I've been waiting for this. Mr. Butterworth is going to give us the background on the issue regarding the update on the final financial plan. And once this is presented, before I ask for a mover and a seconder, I'm going to go to the audience to ask if there's anyone in the gallery who wishes to speak to this. Mrs. Lovegrove, I guess, is going to put on the presentation. Would you proceed? After a number of meetings we've had last year and this year. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. No presentation tonight, just a report that you have in front of you, basically to advise you of the changes that were discussed at the March 26th presentation, and that they have been incorporated now into the budget and will be in the budget bylaw that's coming forward to you shortly, and the recommendations in the report. Thank you.
Okay, on that note, is there anyone in the audience in the gallery who wishes to speak? I'd ask you to come to the microphone and give us your name and civic address. Okay. I need a mover and a seconder that the report from the Manager of Finance dated April 10th, 2018, entitled 2018 to 2022 Financial Plan be received. Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Powell. All those in favor to receive? Thank you. That is unanimous. Finally, another report. Mr. Butterworth, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding the 2018 municipal property tax rates? And I need a mover and a seconder for the four recommendations. Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beil. Mr. Butterworth.
Yes, if I may, Your Worship, for council consideration this evening is the setting of the 2018 property tax rates. The 2018 to 2022 financial plan that was just discussed propose a 4% property tax increase. So the assessed values of the residential class of properties in 2018 increased by about 17.5% from 2017. So we have adjusted the 2017 tax rates so that the average residential property has a tax increase of 4%. In 2017, Council also approved increasing the light industrial tax rate to equalize it with that of the business class rate over 6 years. So this is year 2 of that equalization, and it requires an 11.5% increase to the light industrial class. And the recommendation is as per the agenda.
I'll try not to be too detailed. First of all, we have the 5-year financial plan bylaw 2018-2022, number 1544. I need a mover and a seconder that this plan be read 3 times. Moved by Councillor Beil, seconded by Councillor Powell. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. 3 readings coming up for the tax rate bylaw 2018, number 1545. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Beil, seconded by Councillor Burden. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Nobody's opposed. Finally, for the 3rd reading, I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 200112, and Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 200113 be read a 3rd time. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Powell. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. And then the final adoption of the Parks and Public Open Spaces Amendment Bylaw 2018, number 1523.1. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Powell. All those in favor? Thank you. That is also carried unanimously. Okay, members of council, we're going to move into special business pursuant to Section 91C of the Community Charter. and proceed to a closed meeting to consider an item related to labor relations. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Beil, seconded by Councillor Burton. We are adjourned. We'll take a few minutes break before getting into the meeting.